Hello to all the CAT 2014 takers, and my name is Brajesh. Uh, the session that I am taking right now today is how should you prepare in the forthcoming week so that you are in a position to give your best in CAT 2014. These tips are very important because I think CAT is more about how you handle the pressure than about your aptitude. So let's start with the basics here. Now here, most of the students whom I have taught, they often ask me which is the section that they should attempt. Earlier, the two sections were timed sections. Once you finished the first section, you then took the second section. But in the changed pattern, you can move between the sections. You must keep in mind that you have to attempt that section which you are more comfortable, or that which is your strength. The one who is good in quant must attempt quant first, and the one who is good in verbal must attempt verbal first. For doing so, will give you a definite psychological edge. Now, what do I mean by psychological edge? I think in any entrance exam, the first 5-10 minutes are very important. It is very crucial because these 10 minutes basically build your confidence. And if you start the section in which you're not very comfortable or which is your weak section, then you will lose confidence and that might spoil the entire paper. So my suggestion to most of the students would be that you start with that section which is your strength, in which you are very comfortable, and particularly the kind of questions with which you are comfortable. So there are many people who are very good at parajumbles or fill in the blanks or geometry or let's say LR. They must start the paper with that section. And as far as time distribution is concerned, I think you should devote 10 minutes more to quant. So I would say 90 minutes to quant and 80 minutes to verbal. The reason being, verbal section has questions like word usage, fill in the blanks, which would not take more than 1 minute. But you hardly come across a question in quant which would take less than a minute. So basically, if you go by the number of questions, to solve 25 questions in quant, you will need, let's say, 75 or 80 minutes. But to solve 25 questions in English, you can do that, let's say, in 70 minutes. So I would say that if you talk about division of time, I think 90 minutes is enough for quant and 80 minutes is enough for verbal. There are people who might be very, very good with verbal, so they can read things very quickly. They can come to the answer very quickly. In that case, you might spend 70 minutes in verbal and 100 minutes in quant, but please ensure that you don't overdo this. There are many students who at times end up spending 120 minutes or so in quant and the rest 50 minutes in verbal. That could basically harm your chances of clearing the cutoff in the second section. So ideally speaking, 90 minutes in the first section, that is quant and DI, and 80 minutes in the second section, that is verbal and LAR, would be I think the ideal situation. Now, this is basically about the strategy before you enter the test hall. Once you are in the hall and you start the paper, I would say that you spend 3 minutes scanning the entire section, or you might spend 5 minutes scanning the entire paper. I would ideally say you scan the entire paper because the curiosity would be quelled. And once you have scanned the entire paper, you get a fair idea as to what the questions are all about. So why should you do the scanning and what good things come out of it? Let's take this. When you spend the first 4 minutes scanning the entire paper, you should do this to get a feel of the overall paper. Doing this will bring to your attention the topics from which the questions have been asked, the number of RCs, the number of fill in the blanks, word usage, paracompletion, so on and so forth. This is about the second section, particularly the verbal section. In the first section, you will get a fair idea as to how many questions have been asked from geometry or algebra, arithmetic, functions, permutation, combination, probability. So accordingly, you can adjust and you can plan your paper. And this should happen in the first 5 or 6 minutes. You should not take more than 5-6 minutes to basically plan or to strategize how you'd go ahead in the paper. And I think that in quant this becomes very important because the number of topics in quant is far greater than the number of topics in verbal. Verbal, you have RC, you have Parajumbles, Paracompletion, you have grammar, fill in the blanks, that's it. You have LR caselets. So based on your strength in Quant, you can accordingly pick the questions. And I would say that while scanning the paper, if you come across any kind of question which you think can be done in 20, 30 or 50 seconds or maybe 1 minute, you immediately attempt that question. The purpose behind scanning the paper is that firstly you get a fair idea about the type of questions and the difficulty level. Secondly, you also if you are good enough, you can spot questions immediately, the ones that can be done in 1 minute. So doing those questions in the initial 5-10 minutes boosts your confidence. It lifts your confidence. And therefore, if you spend the initial 15 minutes attempting 3 to 4 questions, I think the tone of the paper is set and you're almost on course of doing well. And the next sentence here says, the next point here says, accordingly, you must carve out a strategy while scanning the paper. If you come across any question that is too simple, immediately attempt it. There will be such questions and attempting them will boost your confidence. So guys, understand, boosting your confidence in the first 15 minutes is very, very important. If you lose confidence and somehow you become nervous or your anxiety gets the better of you in the initial 15 minutes, then you are in trouble. So take care of the first 15 minutes. As far as how to pick the questions, now in both quant and verbal, one must at the start attempt those questions that are short in length. In verbal, it could be fill in the blanks, word usage, parajumbles. In quant, it could be simple concept-based problems. Now, what is a concept-based problem in quant? A concept-based problem would be you just apply a particular theorem or some kind of formula and you get the answer. So there will be questions in quant that you can solve simply by applying the formula. And that is what I would say an easy question or a simple question. A simple question in verbal would be the one which has like fill in the blanks. You are given 2 blank, you have 4 options, you know the meanings, and you can crack the entire question in 1 or even less than 1 minute. That becomes, I would say, a simple concept-based question in both verbal and quant. And ideally speaking, DILR caselets should be attempted not at the very start or at the very end of the test. Now, why it should be? Because DILR and RC, they need concentration. You have to be very careful while reading the entire case or passage. If the initial 10-15 minutes, you basically building your concentration, you are not yet in your full form. So undertaking something which is complicated or demands concentration might not be a good idea in the initial 10 minutes. Once you have passed those initial 10-15 minutes, once you have warmed up, you have gained enough momentum, then you can take the DILR or the RCs. Apart from this, towards the end of the paper, many students come and say that they leave the RCs for the end. Now that is very, very if at all you are doing something in the last 10 minutes, you should not attempt anything which is basically lengthy and which needs time to analyze and which needs time to in which it might take some time to analyze and break the entire question. So for example, RC, if you do it in the last 10 minutes, you would be so nervous you might not even comprehend the passage and randomly mark the answer. Same is the case with DI and LR. You know that time is running out and the knowledge of this fact might weigh down on you or might weigh you down and you might end up making mistakes. So I would say that the DI, LR and the RCs should not be attempted in the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and they should not be attempted in the last 10-15 minutes. They should be attempted when you are in the middle of the paper, so that if you make any mistakes or if you lose on time, you can make up for that in the end. So my suggestion is DI, LR and RC, not at the start, not at the end, but somewhere in between, either after the first half an hour or before the last half an hour. That would be the ideal strategy. Many students ask how should they choose the RCs. I think the RC should be chosen purely on the basis of the length, because time is a constraint and RCs are given in the paper just to see how quickly you can read and comprehend things. And if you read a lengthy RC, it might be very simple but the time that you will consume to read the entire RC could make you nervous and anxious, and you may end up making mistakes. And secondly, short RCs, you might take more than one or two reading. You might invest more time to it and comprehend that RC in a better way. So I would say that you take a short RC, read it more than twice or more than two times, and get the right answer instead of reading a long RC, taking more time to understand, and then again finding the answer. So I would say, if at all you have to pick an RC, you have to go by this length of the RC. I would also say that there are many students who say that what if I go by the content? That also can be a good strategy. So if you are familiar with the content of the RC, something with which you are already aware, something with which you're already aware or acquainted with, you can definitely choose as RC, because that will help you understand the passage in lesser time vis-a-vis a passage with which you are not at all acquainted. So choosing the RCs based on two things: one is length, the other is familiarity. The ones who are comfortable with familiarity, they can go with familiarity of the RC. The ones who are comfortable with the length, they can go for the length. Had I been in your place, I would always go by the length and not with the familiarity, because that can be very deceptive. In verbal, parajumbles, I think, are the easiest. You devote time to parajumbles and you will get it right. And if at all, after doing the initial elimination, you have difficulty arriving at the answer, take an intelligent guess and move ahead. It's quite possible that in verbal you may not be very sure of the right answer, and in spite of investing around 4-5 minutes, if you think that you have not yet arrived at the answer, don't leave the question, but you take an intelligent guess, but don't let not those guesses be all too often. You can take these guesses, let's say sometimes in parajumbles or fill in the blanks, but not always. And that's why I would say that the accuracy percentage in ours in the verbal section should be 80, and in the quant section it should be around 85-90%. That will fetch you a decent accuracy percentage. Now, when it comes to word usage, grammar, and paracompletion, most of the students have hard time going through these questions. They have difficulty because word usage and grammar is entirely based on your knowledge, the technical knowledge of the language. And if you think you don't know, you please leave it. Don't gamble unnecessarily, and don't spend your time reading the question again and again, because if you don't know it, you don't know it. You go to the next one. Paracompletion, I would say, is not often not very convincing. So in case if you think that you have confidently shortlisted two options, then you can take a while to take an intelligent guess, or else you can leave the question. And in verbal, your best bet is fill in the blanks, then comes parajumble, sentence construction, and then reading comprehension. So if I were in your shoes, I would start with fill in the blanks, then I would come to parajumbles, then I would look at the sentence exclusion or the odd sentence, and then the reading comprehension. Word usage questions, at times, if you know the usage, then it can be cracked in 20 seconds. But if you don't know, then so word usage and grammar is purely on the knowledge and not on your aptitude or your logical reasoning. So that I'm not including here, but yes, if you're lucky enough, you might come across the right word usage, and that could be a bonus. Then what should you do in the forthcoming 1 week? I think one major change that I have that has happened this year is that CAT has changed now from 09 to 013. It was in multiple slots, multiple papers, the questions were repeated, and there was more variety. But I think now, since we have the exam only on 2 days, CAT might revert to the older pattern, and you might come across questions which are very similar to the questions that used to come in 04, 05, 7, or 8. So I would say that you please go through all the CAT papers from 2000 to 2008. Go through all the sections and all the questions of all the sections, because there is no practice better than practicing the former CAT questions or the retired CAT questions, because that gives you a glimpse of how exactly the questions that come in the exam will be. And I personally believe that none of the mocks can actually replicate CAT. Take any CAT paper and take any mock, and you will find there's a huge difference in the logic, in the way the concepts are tested, in the difficulty level, so on and so forth. So I would say that you don't take too many mocks and burn yourself out in the forthcoming 1 week. I would say that you take not more than 2 mocks and spend more time analyzing, studying the good questions. When I say what is a good question, a question which has which is simple but has logic in it, deep logic. So so in the actual exam, when you come across a similar question, you should be in a position to crack those questions. And I find that geometry questions are often tweaked and redesigned in each CAT paper. So if you look at the geometry questions of 2000, 2001, 2002, they are not very different from the geometry questions that you see in 2007, 2008 paper. So I would say that go through all the CAT papers from 2000 to 2008 and don't focus much on the other things. You practice from the CAT papers and ensure that you go through the quant part of your mocks, because verbal, I think, is very dicey in most of the mocks. None of the mocks have good verbal content, and it is everywhere across the globe. You'll find that verbal content is often not very satisfactory, but that is a limitation, and that's why I suggest that you take your quant questions of the mocks very seriously. The verbal questions, more or less, I would say you prepare from the CAT papers. But the last thing here is, while practicing, you must switch between the questions. Now, why this? Why I am suggesting this only while practicing? While practicing, you must switch between the questions. Now, this is very important. When you switch between the questions, you can switch between the concepts, and you develop that dynamism, which is very important while taking your CAT paper. Because if you keep on switching between the questions, your mind develops that flexibility of doing something, or doing one activity at one time and then switching immediately to some other activity of the other kind. This is very important because many a time, just because you have been doing 15 questions, you have done 15 questions on permutation and combination, the 16th question, just because you are in some kind of rhythm, you get it right. But the point is, what if you're out of rhythm? So this rhythm question is very important. I would say that you take one geometry question and then immediately take a PNC question, and then take one DI caselet, and then again go to a question from algebra. This kind of practice will help you to develop that dynamism. Apart from that, you don't do any kind of mechanical work. It is basically very dynamic and helps you to recollect the concepts immediately. And this is precisely what is required in the CAT paper. You might get only one question from probability, but when you get that question, your mind should be in a position to recall all the concepts at that very moment and apply it to get the right answer. So if your mind is not capable of switching immediately, then even though the question is very easy, you may not be able to get the right answer. So this dynamism is very important. And if practicing you can do this, then definitely in the exam you will be able to do this. Now here's something about the quant and the DI section. Something more about the quant and DI section. The entire section should be attempted in 2 rounds. Very important. In the first round, you have to scan, select, and mark the questions that are solvable. Scan the entire section for 4 or 5 minutes. The main objective should be to understand the difficulty level, topics from which most of the questions have appeared, and with your experience through marks, you will assess the cutoff. You will assess the cutoff, approximate number of questions you can solve. Now, why is this important? You should have a fair idea of the difficulty level, because if the paper is very difficult, then solving 10 questions might be enough to get 95 percentile in that section. But if the paper is very simple, then solving 25 questions may not be enough to clear the cutoff. So you should have a fair idea as to in what direction you are going. And that's why the scanning is very important. The assessment of the difficulty level is very important. Once you have done that, you can get a feeling that, okay, fine, in this kind of paper, if I solve 15 questions, that will be more than enough for me to get 95 percentile. And that is where you will get the confidence. So assess the difficulty level of the paper, particularly the Quant DI and the LR, because English is such that you may not be able to guess the difficulty so easily. Something more on the DI. While scanning, you can avoid the DI. During this process, you should get 2-3 questions which are very easy to solve. Either through options or simple application of formula or concept. Solve such questions then and there itself. It will open your account. Now, what do we mean by here? The DI section. Now, the DI caselets are long, and reading the entire case might take more than 5 minutes. So when we say that the scanning, in the scanning part, in the initial scanning, you just focus on the quant questions and come to the DI part later. Now, in the DI and the LR sections, you should keep in mind that you may not be able to solve all the questions of in that caselet. In a caselet, you might have 4 questions, of which one is very tough and the other 3 are medium or easy. So you should get the easy questions correct. And in case if you sense that the other question is very tough, you should be wise enough to leave that question. It's better you get 2 easy questions correct in 7 minutes than spend 7 minutes or 10 minutes even to answer one tough question. So the picking is very important. What you should pick and what you should leave is very important, and that decides what your eventual score would be. Once you have gone through the 30-35 minutes in the con section, then try attempting those questions which you have said to be solved. In the second round, 30 minutes particularly, scan the DI caselets and attempt those which you feel can be solved within 10 to 12 minutes. Now, in the first phase in Quant, you select the questions while you scan the paper, and in the first 30-35 minutes you attempt those which you think are easy and can be easily done. In the second phase, in the next 30-35 minutes, you start scanning the DI caselets, and the ones that you think are easy you can solve in 10-12 minutes, you pick them up. And that is how you should plan your quant section. So roughly you can spend 40-45 minutes for quant and 30-35 minutes in DI. It is very important here. It says that in DI caselets, many a time it is better to scan the questions before reading the caselets. So what I suggested to you all in the RCs, the same thing is being suggested for DI and LR. You please scan the questions first and then you read the case. This helps you to get an idea of arranging the data from the caselets. And the same strategy is recommended in LR caselets as well. So you first read the questions and get some idea about the questions, arrange the data as per the questions that have been asked to you, and accordingly you answer them. So these are some of the tips that I thought I should give you, and I wish you all the best for your CAT paper. One thing is very important: don't go with your past. Don't enter the examination hall with your past in your mind. Don't let the mock scores affect your CAT paper that day, because what happened in the mock happened in the mock. It has often been found that what you get in the mocks is not necessarily what you get in your actual CAT. So even if you have been doing very, very well, forget about it. And if you have not been doing very well, again, you have to forget about it. You have to take it as just another paper. And don't think much about what others have to say or how much others are getting. This is a different paper. This is a different day.